gold fell from the sky that night, and by dawn, every man who touched it was dead.
It wasn't a curse. It wasn't fate. It began with one decision: to ignore a warning.
Because sometimes the fastest way to escape suffering is the quickest path to total annihilation.
In a world ruled by ritual and knowledge, power didn't belong to kings, but to those who understood the unseen.
Among them stood one man who possessed something dangerous, a power that could summon wealth from the sky itself. But power without restraint is never a gift. It quietly waits for the moment you lose control. His disciples saw it clearly. Not the power itself, but the weakness growing beneath it. So when the journey began, it wasn't just a road through the forest, it was a test. Because deep inside that forest, men didn't just lose their way, they lost everything. And the moment they stepped into that silence, the trap had already closed around them. They weren't killed, not yet, because to predators like these, a living man can be more profitable than a corpse. Their system was simple: divide, isolate, and wait. Fear would do the rest of the work for them.
But before leaving, the disciple did something most people ignore in moments of panic. He thought ahead.
He didn't warn about the robbers. He warned about something far more dangerous: the weakness inside his own master. Because the real danger wasn't captivity. It was what he might do the moment he saw a chance to escape. The warning was precise, not emotional, not dramatic, just a simple truth most men fail to obey. When the moment comes, do nothing. Advice so powerful it feels almost impossible to follow. Then he left, not knowing that the hardest battles aren't fought outside, but inside the human mind. And then it happened. The sky aligned perfectly, offering him everything he wanted at the worst possible time. This was the moment where discipline could save him, or desire could destroy everything in reach. Pain whispered one thing. Impatience screamed louder. End this now. And he chose the louder voice.
He didn't wait. He didn't think. He didn't remember the warning that could have saved every life. Because the illusion of control is strongest right before everything spirals beyond it. And in that single moment, he traded temporary suffering for irreversible chaos. It began as a miracle, but miracles don't ask who deserves them. They simply amplify what's already inside. And inside them, there was no discipline, only hunger, the kind that grows stronger the more you feed it. For a brief moment, it looked like he had won. Freedom, wealth, escape, all within reach. But when wealth appears suddenly, it doesn't end conflict. It multiplies it. And just like that, the miracle turned into a signal, a beacon calling even more violence toward it. Violence doesn't negotiate. It only escalates until someone loses everything, and tonight, everyone would. The source of it all stood helpless. The man who summoned wealth couldn't control what it created. And when the second group learned the truth, they didn't see a man, they saw a tool. But power has rules, and timing is one of them. Something he could no longer control. And when he said, "Wait," to men consumed by greed, he unknowingly signed his own death. In seconds, the man who chased instant freedom became the first casualty of his own decision. But his death didn't end the violence. It removed the last reason for restraint. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a collapse of control, where greed turned men into executioners. 500 fell, then more, and still it wasn't enough to satisfy what had been unleashed. Because once greed becomes the goal, even allies become obstacles that must be removed. The enemy was gone, but the desire remained, and that was far more dangerous than any external threat. So they did what greedy minds always do. They turned inward, searching for the next thing to conquer. Half became 100, 100 became 50, until numbers meant nothing. Only survival did. Until finally, out of 1,000 men, only 2 remained, and even that was too many. You would think survival brings clarity, but sometimes it only sharpens the instinct to betray. So they made a temporary alliance, not out of trust, but out of calculation.
They hid the wealth, as if burying it could somehow quiet the greed growing inside them.
Then they split roles, one to guard, one to fetch food. A simple plan built on a fragile lie. Because the moment they separated, the real plan began. One that only one of them would survive.
Alone with the treasure, his thoughts changed. Not we, only I. That's where collapse always begins.
Meanwhile, miles away, the same idea was forming in another mind. Identical, inevitable, and just as deadly. Because greed doesn't need communication. It follows a predictable script every time.
One chose violence, the other chose poison. Different methods, same destination.
And neither realized they were no longer fighting each other. They were finishing the chain reaction that had already begun.
He returned with food, carrying not just rice, but a decision already made long before he arrived. and the other waited, not with hunger, but with intention sharpened into something lethal.
Give it to me! Now it's mine! Get back! You'll pay for that!
Victory felt instant, effortless. For a moment, it seemed like the perfect plan had worked. But greed doesn't end with success. It demands completion. And completion, in this case, meant one final mistake. He ate without hesitation, consuming the very plan meant to secure his victory, unaware it was already over. And just like that, the final link in the chain snapped, not with violence, but with inevitability. Days later, someone returned, not to claim victory, but to understand what greed had destroyed. He didn't need witnesses. The pattern was obvious. Every step followed the same predictable weakness. This is the real lesson. Destruction rarely comes from enemies. It comes from impatience, greed, and ignoring wisdom.